Hey there, FPV pilots. It's Smooth Virus, call sign Virus, here with another Vlog 26. I originally, a couple days ago, said that this was going to be even more bad news, and now it's kind of bad news, but it's more like a state of confusion. Maybe, I don't know. I got bad news and then I got good news. I have a couple emails to read. I'm gonna try and get through it as quickly as I can, so don't bore everybody to tears. As you guys already know, my AMA club, Capital Area Soaring Association, aka CASA, in Rockville, Maryland, is getting shut down. Just because the county needs to use, or the county wants to use that site to store fill dirt. You guys may remember back in Christmas of 2015, before I even started this channel, I think I put this on my Smooth Virus channel, but all the clubs within 30 miles of the District of Columbia were shut down by the FAA because a couple of security agencies approached the FAA and said, look, the exact verbiage of your regulations for the special flight rules area, and we're going to be talking about the special flight rules area quite a bit. The exact verbiage says that no recreational RC flying of any kind is allowed. And the FAA said, well, those guys have been flying around here for decades. They don't really cause any problems. They're just hobbyists. And the security agencies said, well, your explanation of this is not good enough. This is not acceptable. We're going to the White House and we're going to the director of your agency, and we want this activity shut down permanently. So we wound up first they shut down NVRC in Fairfax County, and then about 4 months later, they shut everybody down. And that's what I made my video about, and I was on some of the local news channels about what happened when we all got grounded. And we wound up getting grounded for about 2.5 months. I think they shut us all down right like Christmas Eve, like right before Christmas. And then we were allowed to continue operating, I believe it was February 2016. And basically everything went back to the way it was before. I need to give you guys a quick explanation, very quick, of the airspace around Washington, D.C. So what happened was, after 9/11, the FAA implemented the special airspace restrictions within 30 miles of Washington, D.C. So there's two different airspace zones around Washington, D.C. The first one is the flight restricted zone. That extends out to roughly 15 miles around Washington Reagan National Airport. Basically, absolutely nothing is allowed. No RC flying of any kind, any size. They take that flight restricted zone extremely seriously, and local law enforcement has been informed that if they catch anybody flying a drone, an RC airplane, anything inside that airspace, they are to be detained immediately. We are not talking about the FRZ, the flight restricted zone. Now, when I first posted some information about what's going on Facebook, some people kind of got confused and thought that I was talking about flying FPV inside the flight restricted zone. I'm not talking about flying FPV inside the flight restricted zone. The special flight rules area surrounds the flight restricted zone and goes out to about 30 miles around the District of Columbia. You are allowed to fly RC inside the special flight rules area. If I recall correctly, there are about 9 AMA clubs that operate inside the special flight rules area. What happened last Friday is some people from MVRC, they reposted an email that they received from Jay Marsh, who's the District 4 Vice President for the Academy of Model Aeronautics. And I'm just going to read the email. It reads as follows. Hello, everyone. It has been brought to my attention that there is confusion over flying FPV inside the DC Special Flight Rules Area, SFRA. Although the AMA allows FPV with a spotter throughout the country, it is not allowed inside the SFRA, regardless of spotter or not. The FAA is gray in many areas regarding recreational flight, but it is black and white inside the SFRA with serious consequences. We have to follow the rules, or once again, the authorities could ban recreational flying altogether forever the next time. Flying FPV inside a building, even in the FRZ, in a restricted circle, is allowed. Please monitor your members and require that they adhere to the rules and pass this information around. Thank you for all your cooperation, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. A second email has been posted where he kind of justifies his reasoning for this. So this is kind of long, but I'm going to read it. The FAA's response to FPV anywhere within the boundaries of the United States is direct and to the point. If a drone is flown under Public Law 112-95, Section 336, first-person view is prohibited. Public Law 112-95, Section 336 is titled the special Rule for Model Aircraft. Section 336 defines a model aircraft as an unmanned aircraft that is 1. Capable of sustained flight in the atmosphere. 2. Flown within visual line of sight of the person operating the aircraft. 3. Flown for hobby or recreational purposes. The specific legal reference within 112-95, 336, I'm just going to call it 336 from here on out, is flown within visual line of sight or of the person operating the aircraft. Courts in the United States utilize the legal plain meaning or literal rule. In example, public or statutory laws are to be interpreted using the ordinary meaning of the language of the statute. Therefore, the legally accepted plain meaning or literal interpretation of the above reference, the person operating the aircraft must maintain direct, unimpeded visual sight of the aircraft. All enforcement agencies in the United States government, including the FAA, utilize this interpretation. The next fact is that for model airplane purposes, there are 3 airspaces defined within the boundaries of the United States. 1. Washington, D.C. Flight Restricted Zone, 15-mile radius from Reagan National. No model aircraft are allowed to fly. 2. Washington, D.C. Special Flight Rules Area, 30-mile radius from Reagan National. Model aircraft are allowed to fly within the parameters detailed in the special NOTAM 160210. Rest of the United States, model aircraft are allowed to fly with the parameters of Section 336, as stated. It is a known fact that outside the SFRA, the FAA does not actively enforce the law and many times turns a blind eye when it comes to FPV. That is because outside the SFRA, the FAA, with few exceptions, has sole jurisdiction over the airspace and therefore can be discretionary. Inside the SFRA, the enforcement of the law is multi-jurisdictional. In example, FAA, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, Secret Service, and Capitol Police. The SFRA is designated as a national security airspace, and each of these agencies has a role to play in the protection of the SFRA airspace. They take this responsibility very seriously, and each of them interprets the law and NOTAM literally. It is because of the wording of the public law and its literal interpretation by this multi-jurisdictional law enforcement that FPV is expressly prohibited within the SFRA, no exceptions. To secure our ability to fly within the SFRA, the FAA had to negotiate with each of the agencies listed above on the content of NOTAM 160210, and it was only after agreement was reached by all of them that the NOTAM was issued and we were allowed to resume flying. The only thing keeping NOTAM 160210 active is our willingness to honor and abide by its intended content. If any one of these agencies determines that we are not honoring or abiding the NOTAM, they have the right to rescind this agreement with the FAA and just thus shut down all flying within the SFRA, probably permanently. It must also be noted within the SFRA, our relationship with the FAA is direct and not intermediated by the AMA. Whatever agreements or relations the AMA may have with the FAA only apply outside the SFRA. From the viewpoint of the joint jurisdictional agencies within the SFRA, the AMA has no legal authority to interpret the law or inform its members as to how to interpret the law, and therefore is irrelevant. End quote. So basically what he's saying is that if AMA clubs allow any of their members to fly FPV inside the SFRA, then the security agencies will tell the FAA to shut everything down, and no one will ever be allowed to fly hobby RC aircraft inside the SFRA ever again. Okay, I got a little bit pissed off there, so we're just going to keep right on going. I thought the AMA had a lawsuit, which is, I think, right now in abeyance over the FAA's literal interpretation of Section 336 and banning FPV nationwide, which, by the way, with a few notable exceptions that I do know of, they haven't enforced that at all. And everybody just ignores it, including all the major manufacturers and resellers and stores. So this email from our district vice president is pretty frustrating. And I was really upset about this. I was like, well, okay, I was trying to play by the rules. And when we were allowed to fly again in February 2016, I know that people from my club went to the AMA and said, look, if you go by the literal interpretation of this NOTAM, we're not allowed to fly FPV anymore. And the AME said, look, just don't worry about it. Keep flying. We'll deal with it. Keep doing what you're doing and operate. You can operate FPV within the parameters of, I think the AMA rule is Section 550. This is currently only affecting one club in our area, NVRC. I don't know if NVRC has actually shut down FPV flying at the club because I'm not a member there. I do know a lot of people that fly at that club, but I cannot confirm that FPV has been shut down. But they have been advised to shut down by the district vice president. Now, I'm also going to read a couple of posts on Facebook by John Taylor. Now, in case you don't know who John Taylor is a local RC hobbyist who is also an attorney that sued the FAA, and he's the guy that originally got the court system to overturn the FAA registration rule, which of course they turned around and went to Congress and got that made into an actual law. So registration was reinstated. But John Taylor posted on Facebook that the NOTAM requires operations to be line of sight, but that's the rule everywhere under 14 CFR 101.1, so I'm not sure why the DC SFRA is special. The AMA should offer an explanation for the distinction they draw. The real question is one we so often face. What is the whim of the FAA today on this issue? If the FAA isn't threatening to actively enforce it, as they now regulate by direct or rumored threats, not by law, then it shouldn't be an issue. Like so much of the regulation recently imposed on our hobby, this makes no sense. If someone is going to use a drone to attack a DC target, it's not going to be from out in SFRA territory. They're going to launch from closer in. If they did have the range and inclination to make a long-distance attack, they're not going to do it from somewhere where they're going to be seen. An attack is certainly not going to come from someone flying a racing quad from an AMA in the far-flung rural suburbs of DC. Another feel-good measure that has no real-world application. End quote. Yes, I agree with everything John Taylor just said. That is my position as well. This position is ridiculous. It is the reason that there is a 30-mile circle around the District of Columbia is because it is designed to apply to full-sized manned aircraft with people flying in them, like 737s, Learjets, Cessna 172s, not mini Talons and micro quads and, the models that we fly. Not models, but it applies to us for some dumb reason that I do not know. And The security authorities that work just a few blocks down the street need to realize that if you impose a bunch of ridiculous rules on hobbyists in this area, then people will not abide by it because it's dumb. So, before I get too upset, I got a message from an acquaintance that I've known for many years. He's at DCRC, which is another local club inside the SFRA. So what we're doing now is we're transitioning members of CASA to DCRC. And I have been told officially from DCRC that FPV will continue to be allowed at the club and nothing is going to change. They're going to have quad races. And if you show up at DCRC and abide by Section 550, you can fly FPV there. Nothing's changing. So, I don't know, man. At the local level, we're going to keep flying FPV. And at the national level, we're being told absolutely no way. And if you do it, you'll ruin it for everybody else. So my intention at this point is I'm probably going to join DCRC. I guess that's about all I have to say. You guys have heard me rant. I'm going to kind of cut it short. People want to eat dinner, and I'm imposing on their space. So I'm going to cut this short. And you guys, I actually got to fly Sunday, and it was indoors. I flew at an indoor fly-in, and I have a whole bunch of footage of that, which is going to take me several days to work through. So I'll have that up for you in a few days. You guys have a super fine one, and thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end of this long video. Later.